At the moment of recording this video, currently we don't have the ban list for September. So I know I talked about the ban list previously in I think one other video so far, but I wanted to talk about this video in context with a deck I didn't cover so far in ZBTO3 for personal reasons. But today, the head's out of the bag. You're gonna get that Shojodoji video. Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Mr. here. Today I'm here to cover Shojodoji. But this is very different from my usual style of deck profile. In fact, this is not really a deck profile. It is, but it's not really. Today I wanted to take this time to discuss fully one of the most emergent decks in this format. Someone who has been talked to death. He was memed, he was really disrespected at set 8. You know, they used to call him Bozo-Doji. I think I used to see people writing and calling him that. And then afterwards, you know, he got some support. He got 2, now 3 tournament promos. Imagine that. And then they also gave him a whole bunch of stuff like the DBT11 support, which included Isazao and Kagechika. So that was pretty impactful when it came out. And then later on, this year's set DZBTO3, they gave us the new version of Shojodoji. I have personally, I've been playing Shojodoji since DBTO8. I picked the whole deck up for like, what, 2,000 yen? Maybe less. It was really cheap, right? And it was really continuing to be cheap. And yeah, generally speaking, I had no problems building this deck physically myself. I even bought Shenri, I bought everything. And I could always keep my costs very low. But the thing is that right now, it is a very popular deck, even though there's one part of the deck that's very expensive, and that's mainly the Shiranui PG. But other than that, this deck is actually pretty affordable if you built it during the time. If you progress with it, you are generally rewarded with a very good deck. But of course, if you're someone who plays meta all the time and you're hopping, it's going to be a bit more expensive because a lot of these cards have been short printed. Okay, so now that I've gone through the background and everything about this deck, I'm going to lay out with you the popular lists that people use for Shojodoji, using one list as an example, and then I'm going to discuss the main title of today's video, which is what you can hit. And then I'll also discuss how you can counter Shojodoji. Because despite the fact that this deck is actually very heavily played, and it's very popular, the thing about this deck is that it's actually not very difficult to beat. I don't understand a lot of people complaining about it. I think Shojodoji really tests your basics in this game, especially for early game. And I can say this because I played Shoujo from set 8. Even from its basics, it was a pure aggression deck. And the only thing is that it's just gotten better at what it does, but scaling, it doesn't have. It has a lot of attack and can steal a lot of tempo, and that's mainly how they steal the game. But realistically speaking, if you know your matchups, if you know how to act, I don't think this is tier 0. Like, if you want a meta stealth deck, that's still Shiranui. I still need them to hit Shiranui. But it's not like the format-ending tier 0 nonsense that some of you may believe. I certainly don't think that. Even though I've won with this deck multiple tournaments, I've seen multiple people win, I just don't think it's format-ending. But I do feel that with the amount of results we're getting, this deck may get a hit. I definitely want to preface that. I definitely do think this deck can get hit in September, or at least in December if the high play rate continues. Okay, so we'll go through the deck profile right now. So this deck is inspired from, I believe, Issei's list. Issei was one of the first Shojodoji toppers who topped in the WGP. So I'm going to be using a list that's very similar to him, or at least he invented this style-ish. I can't really say invent because it's just a pile of all the stealth cards. But yeah, his list is what I'll be using as a reference. Our grade 3s, we play 4 Shojodoji, 1 in the right deck, and then we play 3 copies of Unprecedented. So that's for the grade 3s. Our grade 2s, hold on, I need to sort everything out. Our grade 2s, we play 1 copy of Unite the Sky, which is our main way to use energy, because we actually have Shojodoji using 3 energy per turn, which means, you know, if you gain energy naturally, you will hit a curve. It's 369, right? Or at least even if your delay is 36. So that means even if you use Cloudwater free food skill every turn, 3, you never actually use the rest of the excess energy you gain from turn 1 and turn 2. This is why Unite the Sky is very popular amongst the Japanese players, myself included, because it's generally the best way you can consume your energy for a deck that has a very static energy curve. If you don't understand what I'm talking about when it comes to energy, please, I will put a link in the description for my Divines Explain. It will talk about the energy curve as well as how you use it. So please watch that if you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, so Unite the Sky is here. But for English players, I don't think you have this yet, but generally this is the optimal pick. For Ojishi is your top 5 at a stealth from your deck to the soul, and then of course when he is used by moved into the soul, you generally can counter blast 1, you can drop 2 of the opponent's cards in a bind zone, and your front row will passively gain 5, which is really good, but like, it is an expensive skill. It also requires that your opponent is grade 3 or greater for his own place on 5, but the counter blast 1 on 5 is not. So that's one of your main uses for CB. The other 2 will come from Isazao and Tsukuyodachi. I'm playing 3, but realistically a lot of people play 4. The ratio doesn't really matter. Isazao, no explanation needed. If you have been playing Vanguard for the last year and a half, you definitely know him. He was part of Shiranui, now he's back in his own native deck. When placed on the Vanguard circle, if your Vanguard is Shojodoji, you can count blast 1, look at the top 5. You know, it's all the same, it's a +1. Generally, this is your strongest pluser because it gives you a CB1 top 5 added guy to your hand. So, no complaints. This guy, Tsukuyodachi, he is the multi-attacker from the bind zone. Shojodoji realistically only gives you 4 attacks at base. But all your Twitter combos of watching people multi-attack, it's all this guy's fault. So, just keep in mind. I will get later into the ban segment, but currently, yes, that's all you have to know for the status of this deck. Moving along to our grade 1s. Our grade 1s, we have 4 copies of Kagechika, 4 copies of Kinran, 4 copies of Ride On Time, Go Decker, oh this is Ride On Kunai, and then for Stealth PG, for the sake of this list, I just use the non-Shiranui Stealth PG. I remember writing an article about this with 0 to pass. I hope he's doing well. But yeah, you can use any Stealth PG. I don't think it matters. This is for the very poor people. But if you have the Shiranui PG, that's definitely the meta option. Other than that though, Rhino Kunai is your main CC and it gives you shield from the bind zone. The issue is that he has to reach the bind zone, but like, yeah, that aside though, he is the CC guy. Kinran is the main way you turn on your plays. At the end of the battle, this unit boosts with a grade 2 or greater Shojodoji, move 2 units in the same column as this into the soul, and then you can choose a card with stealth that's grade 2 or greater from your drop, add it to the hand. This is your main way to gain your advantage, to clear your columns so that you can enable Shojodoji's multi-attack. So he's definitely Shoujo's main game enabler, so this guy, definitely watch out for him. He's very strong. Kagechika is your safety net. When placed on a Vanguard circle, choose a stealth from your soul. Choose a stealth from your drop and move into the soul. So generally, you can use this to loop any of your multi-attacks that have fallen, any of your shield that you may have lost, or even better, any of your attackers that you may have lost in the process or healed out. You can use Kagechika as a safety net. It's a very quick way to fish them all back. I think it's a pretty good card, but I'm not sure if you want to play it at 4. But for teams format though, this is definitely really good. You definitely want this at 4. The second skill is that when 2 or more, when your stealth unit on the regular circle is moved into your soul, you can move himself to the soul and draw 1. So he's basically Zuitan, V Zuitan of course. And then of course the rest of the triggers is, you know, standard, 8 crits, and then 3 fronts or 3 draws. Frankly, it doesn't matter. And of course, the over trigger has to be dropped better because if you can withstand Shojodoji, you turn on another 2 to 3 attacks for free. So yeah, you definitely want that. Okay, so that ties up our Shojodoji deck profile. That is the entire thing. Now, what are the main power cards of this deck and what can we hit? So I think that's what everyone is really here for. So definitely the right line, right? This guy gives you a top 5. This guy gives you a top 5. And then hit. Right? Your early game is really strong in this deck. I think we all know that. The main cards of the deck that most people don't like, and I would think are hit suspects, would be Isazao. I think Isazao definitely is the easiest hit target because he's the one that broke Shiranui in the first place. So definitely he's one of the easiest contenders to hit. He's by no means a broken card, but it's just that for some reason nobody knows how to CP deny. So like they just keep feeding into this guy and he just leads into much more turbo and it's a lot more madness. I don't think they will hit Ojishi. It's too new of a card, and frankly, Ojishi doesn't help you plus. It only helps you turn Shojodoji's bind into an actual minus, and then it just gives 5k. It's good, but like this is necessary for new Shoujo to function. If not, you're just dead in the water. Another card that I know some people are calling for ban would be Kinran, but I think Kinran falls in the same issue that he's too new. I get that he's good, he's the main play enabler, but he's also a -1. Like, this guy moves 2 units or so to add 1 back. He doesn't really plus in the economy, which is why I'm always very puzzled when people say, whoa, Shoujo can plus 3 on turn 2. I'm like, really? I love to see that, because I don't see that, you know? And then, of course, I think the rest of the cards, if you just go through by honorable mention, Rhydon Kunai, I also don't think he's gonna get hit. Yeah, I get he's pretty degenerate sometimes because he can guard from the bind zone, but the question is how many Rhydon Kunai can you realistically bind when Shoujo only binds you 3 per turn, and then you have, if I'm not wrong, the right line, the grade 1 and 2 can each bind up to 1 each, right? So at most you get 3, 4, 5, and then 3 every turn, and then you call 2 with this guy's skill. So you bind 3, call 2 means realistically you only can have a spare of 1. Which, yeah, it's not bad, but I just don't really see it practically going out. I know someone else that they may call to ban is obviously going to be Unprecedented. Unprecedented, yeah, he's definitely possible because, you know, he is a 23k beater minimum. He slaps really hard numbers and he draws, and you can even use him as early as turn 2 if you superior call him with grade 2 Shoujo. So yeah, he's definitely a possible victim here. I'm not sure they will, because he's pretty valuable in terms of the second-hand market. I don't know if Bushiroad will be willing to hit a card like that. But he's definitely a candidate. Like, he sells out his first place, this guy is probably second place on that list. Tsukuyodachi, as much as Tsukuyodachi is responsible for a lot of the, you know, meta bullshit that a lot of people are crying about online, I don't see this being the hit. I don't see Tsukuyodachi being the hit because a lot of his plays are CB locked and it requires you to have set up very far ahead to be able to combo off and kill people. This is not like Bruce. I will link the Bruce video in the link in the description. The Bruce deck honestly sets up way easier than Tsukuyodachi. So if you want to hit Bruce, then you have to back out different tree, man. But this guy, he needs his setup. He needs to be seen. He needs to be bound, and he needs to have enough counterblast to loop it. I know I said that, you know, Rhydon Kunai is a counter charge, but it's not that accessible. It's not that bad, realistically speaking. Although the CB cost of this deck is reduced because new Shoujo doesn't use Counterblast, realistically speaking, if they hit Tsukuyodachi, the main advantage, the main game planner's deck doesn't change at all. So hitting this is kind of like going up to a wheelchair guy and then scraping his, you know, just scraping his frame. Like, yeah, the wheelchair still moves, it's just, you know, it just looks dirty, and that's really all you do. You don't stop it. If you want to, you know, kill Shoujo, if you want to nerf him, you want to kill this deck, then you need to hit the wheels, you know. You need to hit these two because these two are definitely the two main game enablers. I would not classify Kinran as a hit just because he's too new and he's a rare. Realistically, if they hit Kinran, the next card they'll go to is Shenri or Folktale. So I just don't see this being the hit. It is just not practical. But other than that though, so yeah, if you are here for the hit section, then these are the two I would say are going to get hit. I just don't think they'll hit Unite the Sky either. I think that's like the worst hit possible in this deck. And if you hit Unite the Sky, it sends a really bad signal to Korokoro, and they'll probably scrap the collab next year. And the collab is making, you know, Kidani a frick ton of money, so I just really... This is the last possible hit. Like, they have to hit everything else in this deck first before they reach Unite the Sky. So I just don't see Unite the Sky being a hit. And it's at 1 anyway, so what are you going to hit it to? 0? And they'll just swap it with Farhan anyway, so it doesn't even matter. So yeah, the Gun Cycler literally just does this guy's job. So there you go. So these two definitely will be the hits in my opinion. Now, I've talked about this deck a lot now, and you've heard all my takes about it. Now the question remains, how do you counter Shojodoji? Shojodoji, in my opinion, is not a broken deck. I'm not saying this out of personal bias. I'm not saying this because I'm a Bozo Doji defender. I am saying this from the bottom of my heart. I just don't think this deck is that good. I've beaten this deck before in like 2 different WGPs already. I just don't think this deck is that good. I think this deck has a very strong set of traits that counter a lot of people in this meta, especially those who are not prepared. The deck can spot remove, the deck can hand rip, the deck can multi-attack and tri-lane and aggro very quickly. But I don't see this being good still because realistically that's all it does. Beyond its scaling, it's firstly really relying on Persona right. If you don't Persona right, your numbers will always stay around the same axis of 18, 23, 33 max. If you don't really hit anything beyond that, even 40k, impossible. So definitely, if you are, someone who is playing this competitively and you're very worried about Shojodoji, I think my first advice to you is that you will need to try and aim to win the tempo game. You will definitely need to try and win the early game and stall them if necessary. Especially for people who play strike deck sets, Your name of your game is to stall. Your name of your game is to drag the game as long as possible. Shojodoji wants the exact opposite of that. He wants to kill you as fast as humanly possible. So because of that, I would not hesitate to tell you to play more defensive options to stop him. And how can you stop him? Firstly, you should CB deny his turn 2. Definitely, I think that's the easiest thing you can do is to shut off his turn 2. CB deny him, Isazao is out. I know what some of you may be thinking, but honest, he may not have Isazao. He will get Isazao. Eventually, it is an inevitability. He's going to draw it, he's going to get it, and it's his main power play on turn 2. You want to shut him out. You want to make it so that if he commits to the board, it's always going to be a 1-to-1, a 1-to-1, a 1-to-1, which means you can pick off the rear guards and you can swing easier. Yes, you may have to give up a drive check, but this tempo here is way more devastating than anything else this deck even has to offer. So make sure you hit him first. You get him, you CB deny Shojodoji on turn 2, you just don't swing, don't give him damage, make sure his turn 2 is vanilla. Now, that being said though, you realistically can't not attack him forever. You have to attack into him, and eventually he'll get to use his Izazao on turn 2 and whatnot. Yes, that's part of the game. The second thing you should do, and I think this comes as a surprise to nobody, is you need to guard early. You need to guard early because you need to stay at a low damage count. Realistically speaking, as I mentioned previously, Shojodoji's numbers don't go very far. His call skills doesn't give him power. The only way he powers up is by Persona Ride, if you already have an innate number, or you have Ojishi. Realistically, these are the only 3 ways this deck can gain power. Isazao, the power is only to the Vanguard column, so it doesn't really matter. Rhino Kunai, it only tags on an additional 5k. Everything else in this deck does not give him power. So, as long as you're realistically able to guard early and you can take attacks later on, you can actually get 1 to 2 defensives, hopefully. But generally, 1 defensive would put him back very far because it would make him force you to guard with like 5ks rather than 15ks, and that's very impactful. Shojodoji at the normal core has 1, 2, 3, 4 attacks. 3 on his column, Shojodoji himself, and 1 more. And then if he has additional CB to spare, he'll use it on Tsukuyodachi, right? All this will be out the window because not even Tsukuyodachi gains power. You need to remember that your defensives will help you. So playing decks like Impuldio, playing decks like Sianna, defensive decks will actually stop Shoujo for his turn 3 rush. The early game, like I said, pretty difficult because if you don't know how to CB deny Isazao, who is easily the hard carry of this deck, then it's tough life for you. But if you can survive that, if you can survive Shoujo's early game and be at say 1 to 2 damage by the time he rides into his grade 3 Shoujo, I say you're actually in a great position. I would not hesitate to say that, oh, you are definitely favored in this matchup because you can afford to take 1 to 2 defensives, hopefully, and then that would turn it around. If you're really unlucky, I'm sorry, but it's not that bad of a deal. If you manage to survive Shoujo to turn 4, and his hand size is less than 6, it should be your win. It very much should be your win. Most functioning decks should be able to punch and break through that, Eugene included, right? So definitely I would say the top 2 things I would say to counter him is to CB deny Isasa on turn 2 and to guard early to farm your defensives, because your defensives will help you, because this deck just doesn't gain that much power compared to Shiranui. So just remember these 2 steps in mind and you generally should be okay. In conclusion, I still don't think this deck is very powerful. I think this deck is really good at what it does, but a lot of people are really exaggerating it, and it doesn't help that especially in Japan, we have teams formats, right? So when you go into teams, Shoujo is a very polarizing kind of deck where he can very easily shred a matchup that a lot of people won't think of. He can shred Hostage, he can shred Blandimeyer, he can shred Rezael and Co. It's very easy for him to do that because of the nature of his high aggression, and he can farm and whatnot. But as long as you just guard early and don't give him that turn to Isazao, he's generally on the back foot by then because he has to spend a lot of cards from hand to call. That means his guard value is relatively lower. even though he has this guy in the bind zone, it would mean that he would have to see right on kunai and then bind him, which, let's be fair, it doesn't always happen. So that's really the long and short about it. I think there's definitely a way for shoujo players to innovate out of a ban list even. They can look to options like Shenri, they can look to options like Folktale, the new tournament promo. There's plenty of options left for them. The basics of this deck hasn't changed since set 8. And I think that's a really powerful message I want to put out there, because a lot of people do posting about this deck, I feel, don't actually know how to counter it. They don't actually know how it works unless, you know, someone tells them, hopefully. And it's really just not a hard deck in my personal opinion. And that's why I'm more than happy to tell you about this deck right before the ban list. Honestly, do I want them to hit Isasawa and Unprecedented and whatnot? I'm not sure. But there definitely is a possibility of it being hit tomorrow, yeah. Because, you know, the results are that Shoujo is one of the most heavily represented decks because it's very affordable and it's very easy to play. So that could be some of the reasons that lead to people's frustration, but it is by no means tier 0. Like, if you want to talk about tier 0, man, we have a lot of other decks to talk about. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this style of video, if you found this interesting, let me know in the comments. I think this is very new for me. I definitely haven't done this before, where I turn a deck profile into a deck discussion. But definitely one of the reasons I thought of doing this is because this deck has been talked about to death. So if I do a deck profile, no one benefits. And the number one thing about this channel is that I want to cover content where you guys would learn something. I don't put out stuff just to waste time. I generally want to put out stuff that people can react to and respond to, and hopefully it helps someone. So that's mainly why I wanted to do this shoujo deck discussion. It's not a deck profile, this is not it, but I wanted to also show you a sample list so we had a basis on what we can talk about. I don't think it's right that we start a discussion on a deck and I don't give you a frame of reference. So again, this version of the list is based on Issei's list from WGP. I don't know what the English meta is going to look like for shoujo. Definitely, I don't believe they have Unite the Sky, but they do have Farhando. So definitely that would be the stand-in for Unite the Sky. But realistically speaking, this deck should look about the same, as long as, you know, they don't innovate further. To be fair, I don't really think you can innovate further beyond Folktale. But yeah, that's really about it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Happy Banlist.